Claire grew up in a family of dentists, and from a young age, she did not need anything. Her parents, professionals in their field, have always put a priority on good treatment of patients, high quality of work, and affordable prices. That is why they decided to open their own dental clinic. Their patient flow only increased year by year and brought in a considerable income. By the time Claire was born, her family could afford to live in splendid conditions of living, travel to expensive resorts, buy fashionable clothes and shoes. When it came to the question of enrolling in university, Claire's parents, as it often happens in doctors' families, were confident that their daughter would follow in their footsteps, but the girl had other plans. Claire easily got into the best law school in the country and returned home with a law degree. She found a job as an intern at a high-profile law firm, and soon, showing good character, was accepted on the staff. A year was enough for her to gain not only experience but also a name. Claire was glad she did not make a mistake in her choice of profession. Her clients were often ordinary, not wealthy people, who were victims of coincidence, and she always tried to do everything to restore justice. And after one of the trials, where Claire proved that her client was not guilty of the accident, she met with Logan. He came to support his friend, who had been accused of causing the accident, and after the trial he came over to thank her. He looked at the girl so admiringly that she immediately believed in the sincerity of his words. Thus began their romance. Logan turned out to be a clever and kind man, but he immediately told her that he was not rich, lived with his mother with a disability, and two sisters who were still in school. He had studied programming but dropped out to support his family. He understood he was not a good match for Claire, and would have put up with her refusal, but Claire felt that he was the only one she needed in her life. Soon, she insisted that Logan meet her parents. He did not hide his fears about it, as he knew that they would not be pleased with him. But Claire almost dragged him by force to dinner at her parents' house. And to Logan's great surprise, the evening passed in a warm and friendly atmosphere, and Claire's parents immediately accepted him as their own son. Shortly thereafter, Claire suggested that Logan move in with her. She was a little afraid that everyday life would ruin their relationship, but things got even better, because Logan carefully took care of Claire. "Are you going to get married?" Claire's father asked Logan once. "Yes, as soon as I can get back on my feet and provide for us completely. So far, my salary only suffices for living expenses," replied Logan. "You know, Logan," the mother stepped in, "when Claire's father and I got married, we didn't even have enough money for food. So, it's not an argument," she added, putting an end to the discussion. Soon Logan and Claire got married. Claire knew that Logan was very nervous, because almost all the wedding costs were paid by her parents. He was very uncomfortable, but Claire's father made it clear that they loved their daughter just as much as he did. So the wedding had to be a wonderful event. Logan really wanted to be the main breadwinner in the family, and Claire was always amazed at this male character trait in him. The man who grew up without a father, surrounded by women, behaved like a true man, and Claire appreciated it very much. She also became very close to Logan's mother and sisters, and even secretly helped them to buy the girls clothes, shoes, and other gifts. They refused at first, but Claire managed to talk them out of it. Of course, Logan was aware of everything, but his sisters were so happy that he had to put up with it. The only thing that Claire failed at was pleasing Logan's mother. "No need, honey, don't buy me anything. You already do a lot for us," she used to say to Claire. "You just know that Logan loves you very much and cherishes you." Logan was working more and more, but he realized that he was far away from Claire's salary. Claire constantly told him that money was not essential, because she was happy with him, and they had enough to live on. But Logan could not calm down, and he continued to come home late from work, and even sometimes worked on weekends. One day, Logan told Claire about the idea of his own business. She found it reasonable, but it took a long time to talk him out of taking a bank loan. And after all, he agreed to borrow money from her parents, who happily supported her son-in-law and gave him the full amount right away. Logan fully immersed himself in the new business, worked hard. But after 2 months it turned out that his assistants had just deceived him in the most cowardly way, taking advantage of his inexperience and trustfulness. Logan became bankrupt. He had long been unable to recover from the failure, and then he returned to various part-time jobs. The man barely spoke to Claire, only firmly hugged her in the evenings as if to relieve himself. Upon learning of what had happened, Claire's parents supported their son-in-law, advising him to stop and keep looking for other business options, and promising to provide the necessary help. And Logan was always in search, and working to the point of exhaustion. He was so tired that Claire sometimes feared for his health. His search for a job, his guilt over Claire for not giving her the kind of life she deserved, was eating the man up. Now the couple rarely talked, even more rarely went out, neither to visit friends nor to the theater or to the cinema. Claire did not even start talking about it. She tried to make sure that Logan at least got a good night's sleep and ate some food. The man was always pale, looked tired, and lost even more weight. Even Claire's parents had noticed this, and her mother advised him to have an examination, but Logan categorically refused. He assured her that everything was fine, and as soon as his new business was up and running, everything would be back to normal. Claire's father offered that his son-in-law to take the money for the development, but this time Logan flatly refused, referring to the fact that he had not returned the previous debt. When Logan and Claire remained alone, Logan spoke to his wife for the first time in a high-pitched tone. "That's it. I will not take any more money from your parents. I no longer have any respect for myself, and I feel that you, Claire, despise me." He said so sharply that Claire shuddered. From that day on, he completely isolated himself from her. He only came home for the night, and even stopped visiting his mother and sisters. They, like Claire, did not understand what was wrong, but they also began to suspect that something was going on with Logan, and it was not because of the failures in business. Claire could not allow the idea that her husband had another woman, because there was no more honest and decent man in the world. Claire's head was constantly bursting with all sorts of assumptions, especially when her husband increasingly secluded himself in another room to talk on the phone. Worries about her husband occupied Claire so much that it began to reflect negatively on her work. Once she almost lost a case, and only at the last moment was able to pull herself together and bring the line of defense to the winning end. That was the last straw. Claire left the courtroom and headed straight home. When she opened the door, she immediately realized that her husband was home and talking to someone on the phone. She unwittingly overheard Logan refusing some kind of surgery. "Thank you for everything you have done for me, but I don't have opportunity for this right now." Logan said farewell. Claire, realizing that something bad had happened to her husband, she burst into the room and desperately demanded him to tell her the whole truth. But she had not expected how cruel this truth would turn out to be. Immediately after his first unsuccessful attempt at business, Logan felt a severe headache. Without telling his wife or his mother and sisters, he went to the hospital, where he heard that he had a brain tumor. The doctor prescribed a supportive treatment for Logan, but told him that he needed an expensive operation, and that the insurance would not cover it in full. Logan was aware of what would happen if he would not have surgery to remove the tumor, but he continued to take pills and postpone the surgery because he first wanted to establish a new business, which he could bequeath to his wife and his mother with his sisters in case of a bad outcome. And now the doctor said that they cannot wait any longer. Claire was shaking with sobs, but suddenly she stood up sharply and shouted through her tears, "Get dressed." Immediately, Logan obediently got dressed, ready to do anything to get Claire to stop crying. Not half an hour later, Logan was telling Claire's parents the whole story all over again. The father came to his senses first. "Logan, tell me the truth. Why did you marry our daughter? To make her a widow? Great plan, and you know what? You're just a coward. You give up without a fight. All you have in mind is money. Yes, you didn't earn it right away, but why suffer and agonize over it? Why did you see our help as humiliation? Do you think leaving the woman you love as a widow is something to be proud of?" "All right, Ben, stop it." Claire's mother interrupted him and turned to Logan. "We're going to the hospital right now, and no objections," she said menacingly. Seeing how determined her mother was, Claire was again convinced of how dear Logan was to them. But he kept quiet for a moment and then said that it was late and there was no need to go anywhere. "No." Claire went over to her husband and hugged him tightly. "I have heard the doctors say it wasn't too late. All right, let's go quick," the father sharply commanded. All the way, Claire hugged her husband and whispered to him how much she loved and believed in him. She tried to convince him that she was ready to support him in whatever he was doing, because she knew how important it was to him. But no amount of money would replace her beloved man if he would suddenly be gone. From then on, there was the most difficult 4 months for everyone. Surgery after surgery, a week in the intensive care unit, an unquenchable hope in the eyes of the whole family. And soon the day came when the doctor received the results of the tests and finally pleased his patient. "Well, Logan, let's say goodbye. It's your time to go home." Logan did not immediately grasp the meaning of the doctor's words, and when he heard Claire's happy exclamation, he felt tears of joy fill his eyes. But he was not ashamed of that. He felt ashamed for not believing in himself the way Claire had believed in him, for hiding his pain and weakness from her. If he had confessed right away, everything would have gone much easier for everyone. And then Logan gave himself a firm word that from now on, there would always be trust in their relationship and he would never make her cry and worry again. Happy endings happen not only in fairy tales. There were still many difficult moments in Claire and Logan's life, but there was much more happiness in it. Logan finally set up his business, and it allowed him to send his mother abroad for medical treatment and give his sisters an excellent education. And 3 years later, when the couple had a little daughter who looked so much like Claire, they became truly happy, and life, as I've come to know it, is a tapestry of routines, each thread meticulously woven to maintain a semblance of normalcy. My name is Sophie, a 38-year-old literature teacher, married to Julian, an architect whose passion for his work often eclipses everything else. Together we have 2 children, a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, both engulfed in their own worlds of adolescence and primary school adventures. Our mornings are a predictable flurry of activity. The alarm clock blares at 6:30 a.m., a siren tearing through the silence of dawn. I shuffle out of bed, often finding Julian's side already vacant, a cold reminder of his early starts. The preparation for the day begins in a systematic fashion. Brewing coffee, flipping pancakes, reminding the kids to brush their teeth, and double-checking backpacks. At work, the school corridors echo with the familiar cacophony of youthful chatter and locker slams. My days are spent in the embrace of literature, dissecting the intricacies of prose and poetry with students whose interest in the subject varies from passionate to non-existent. I often find solace in the words of the authors I teach, their narratives a subtle escape from the mundanity of my existence. Evenings at home are a mirror of the morning, structured, timed, and predictable. Julian usually arrives late, his face etched with the day's fatigue, often bringing work home. Dinner conversations revolve around mundane topics, school projects, neighborhood gossip, and the occasional planning of family outings that rarely materialize due to Julian's hectic schedule. In the quiet hours after the children have succumbed to sleep and house hums with the silence of the night, I often find myself sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand, staring into the void. These moments are my silent companions, a time to reflect on the day gone by and the one to come, a repetitive cycle that defines my existence. It was during one of these evenings that the past decided to re-enter my life, an unexpected message on social media. A simple hello from Thomas, a former student, now a writer. Little did I know, this innocuous greeting was the first ripple in the calm waters of my life, a precursor to the storm that was about to unfold. The message from Thomas arrived on a Thursday evening, a blip on the screen that momentarily drew me away from my routine. Thomas had been one of my more memorable students, known for his eloquent essays and a keen interest in classic literature. His message, brief yet courteous, inquired about my well-being and mentioned his recent accomplishment, the publication of his first novel. Curiosity piqued, I responded, congratulating him on his success and expressing a genuine interest in his work. Our conversation, initially revolving around his book and literary pursuits, gradually evolved into a regular exchange. We discussed various authors and their styles, the evolution of literary genres, and the challenges of writing. Thomas's perspective was refreshing, his insights sharp, igniting a spark in our discussions that I hadn't realized I was missing. As weeks turned into months, our communication became a regular part of my evenings. Julian, often preoccupied with his architectural designs, hardly noticed my growing engagement in these online conversations. For me, these interactions with Thomas became a window to a world I had long forgotten. A world where passion for literature wasn't just a professional requirement, but a shared enthusiasm. One late autumn evening, Thomas suggested meeting up to discuss a book we had both been reading. The idea, innocent in its inception, seemed like a natural progression of our literary camaraderie. We agreed to meet at a local cafe, a neutral space where the aroma of coffee and the rustle of pages would complement our discussion. The day of the meeting arrived with a mix of anticipation and a sense of normalcy. I chose a simple outfit, nothing too formal, nothing too casual, and left the house under the pretext of an evening with colleagues. The cafe was a quaint little place, nestled between a bookstore and an art gallery, its windows fogged up from the warmth inside. Thomas was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 coffees, his face lighting up as I entered. We greeted each other with a polite awkwardness, a physical manifestation of our previously digital-only interactions. The conversation started with the book but soon meandered through various topics: his writing process, my teaching experiences, and subtle glimpses into our personal lives. As the evening wore on, I found myself engrossed in our conversation, the hours slipping away unnoticed. It was only when the cafe staff began closing up that we realized how long we had been there. Parting ways, we agreed to meet again, both under the guise of our shared literary interests. Little did I realize then that this meeting was the beginning of a journey that would lead me down a path far removed from the predictable life I had been living. The meetings with Thomas became a more frequent occurrence, evolving from discussions about literature to sharing personal anecdotes and laughter. It was a refreshing change from my daily life, a secret escape that I looked forward to with increasing anticipation. Our conversations were no longer confined to the walls of the cafe. They spilled over into walks in the park, visits to local bookstores, and quiet dinners in discreet corners of the city. Julian, immersed in his work, remained oblivious to these developments. At home, I maintained the facade of normalcy, performing my roles as a wife and mother with practiced ease. However, inside, I felt a growing disconnect from the life I was leading and the one I was secretly yearning for. As spring turned to summer, the nature of my relationship with Thomas began to shift. What started as intellectual attraction slowly morphed into something more. The realization hit me one evening when Thomas casually took my hand as we walked. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through me, awakening feelings I hadn't experienced in years. One night, after a particularly engaging dinner, Thomas walked me to my car. The air was warm, and the streets were bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. It was then, in that moment of solitude, that our relationship crossed the line. A kiss, hesitant at first, then deepening with a passion that surprised us both, sealed our descent into an affair. The following weeks were a whirlwind. We met more frequently, each encounter intensifying our connection. Messages and calls filled the gaps between our meetings, creating a constant presence in each other's lives. I was aware of the risks, the potential devastation it could bring to my family, but I was too entangled in the web of the affair to pull away. Despite the guilt that gnawed at me, I continued to meet Thomas. Our liaisons were carefully planned to avoid suspicion, often under the guise of work-related meetings or outings with friends. The thrill of the secret, combined with the intensity of our connection, created a bubble around us, isolating us from the reality of our actions. As autumn approached, the inevitability of our situation began to weigh on me. I knew that what we were doing was wrong, that it was only a matter of time before our secret world would collide with reality. The thought of hurting Julian and my children filled me with dread, yet I felt powerless to end the affair. It was a precarious balance, a dance on the edge of a precipice, and I was all too aware that one misstep could send everything crashing down. But in the midst of it all, I was unable to resist the pull of the affair, caught in the grip of something that felt larger than life, yet fraught with the potential for destruction. The precarious balance of my double life began to unravel one evening in late autumn. Julian, who seldom pried into my affairs, accidentally stumbled upon a string of messages from Thomas on my phone. The messages, laden with endearments and plans for future meetings, laid bare the truth I had been hiding. Confrontation was inevitable. That night, as I returned home, I was met with a somber silence that blanketed the house. Julian sat at the kitchen table, my phone beside him, his expression a mix of hurt and disbelief. The air was thick with tension as I braced myself for the inevitable. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Julian's voice was calm, but it bore the weight of 1,000 unspoken accusations. The words caught in my throat, guilt and fear intertwining, rendering me momentarily speechless. The conversation that ensued was a painful unraveling of the lies I had woven. Julian's questions, direct and piercing, demanded honesty, and with each answer, the facade of our marriage crumbled. I admitted to the affair with Thomas, trying to explain the how and why, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Julian's reaction was a mixture of anger, hurt, and confusion. He struggled to comprehend how I, the woman he had loved and trusted for over 15 years, could betray him in such a manner. The questions he asked were ones I had asked myself countless times. Why did I do it? What was I looking for? Did I ever think of the consequences? That night, the house felt colder than usual, the walls echoing with the remnants of our shattered trust. Julian slept in the guest room, a physical manifestation of the emotional chasm that had opened between us. The reality of what I had done, the magnitude of my betrayal, began to sink in. In the days that followed, our home became a battleground of emotions. Julian oscillated between anger and sorrow, while I grappled with guilt and regret. Discussions about the future of our marriage were fraught with uncertainty. Julian was clear about one thing: the children should not be made to suffer because of our issues. I suggested counseling, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our marriage. Julian, though hesitant, agreed. It was a small glimmer of hope in an otherwise dark situation. However, the path to healing was fraught with obstacles, the foremost being whether we could ever rebuild the trust that had been so thoroughly broken. As we embarked on this uncertain journey, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of my situation. In seeking something that I thought was missing in my life, I had risked everything that truly mattered. The affair, which had once seemed like an escape, now felt like a chain that bound me to a future filled with uncertainty and remorse. In the wake of the confrontation, the atmosphere in our home became one of palpable tension. Julian and I moved through our days like strangers, our interactions limited and strained. The children, sensing the shift, reacted in their own ways. Our daughter became quiet and withdrawn, while our son displayed bouts of anger and confusion. Amidst this turmoil, I continued to grapple with my own turmoil. The affair with Thomas, now ended abruptly, left a void, but it was overshadowed by the guilt and the pain I saw in Julian's eyes every day. I knew I had to make things right, not just for my sake but for our family. Julian, for his part, was torn. The man I knew, who once spoke of forgiveness and understanding, was now distant, his pain evident. Yet he didn't ask for a divorce. Instead, he suggested we maintain a semblance of normalcy for the children until we figured out what to do next. The counseling sessions began, a weekly ritual where we laid bare our feelings and grievances under the guidance of a therapist. Julian spoke of his sense of betrayal and loss of trust. I listened, each word a reminder of the hurt I had caused. I talked about the loneliness and disconnection I had felt in our marriage, which led me to seek solace elsewhere. The therapist worked with us to understand our emotions and to find a path towards healing or closure. Meanwhile, Thomas tried to reach out to me, but I ignored his attempts. My focus was on repairing the damage I had caused to my family. Yet, the strain of the situation was evident. Our home, once a haven of love and laughter, had turned into a place of silent battles and unspoken grief. As the weeks turned into months, Julian and I made an effort to be civil to each other, especially in front of the children. We attended school events, had family dinners, and maintained the routines that had anchored our family life. But the undercurrent of tension was always there, an invisible barrier that kept us from truly reconnecting. The turning point came one evening when our daughter, unable to bear the silent conflict, broke down in tears. She begged us to stop pretending and to be honest about what was happening. That night, Julian and I had a long heart-to-heart conversation. It was the first time since the confrontation that we had really communicated. We talked about our marriage, our children, and what we both wanted for the future. The conversation was difficult, but it was necessary. It became clear that while Julian was willing to work on our marriage, the path to rebuilding trust was going to be long and uncertain. The possibility of our family staying intact seemed slim, but we agreed to keep trying for the sake of our children. The chapter closes with Sophie reflecting on the complexity of their situation, recognizing the long road ahead in either healing or parting ways, and the impact their decisions would have on their family. The challenges of rebuilding our family were compounded by an unexpected factor: Thomas. After I had ended our affair, I hoped he would respect my decision and move on. However, it became apparent that Thomas was not ready to let go. His attempts to contact me grew more frequent and insistent, shifting from regretful messages to outright pleas and eventually to thinly veiled threats. Thomas's persistence added an extra layer of stress to an already strained situation. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, fearful of an encounter that could further jeopardize my efforts to mend my marriage. His messages, which I had initially ignored, became impossible to overlook when he started hinting at making our affair public. Julian, already struggling with the betrayal, became even more troubled when he learned about Thomas's behavior. The knowledge that someone else was aggressively trying to insert themselves into our already fragile situation added a new dimension of tension between us. Our therapist advised me to be transparent with Julian about Thomas's actions. Following this advice, I showed Julian the messages. He read them, his expression a mix of anger and concern. We discussed the possibility of taking legal action if Thomas's behavior escalated, but we both hoped it would not come to that. The situation with Thomas reached a critical point one evening when he unexpectedly showed up at a restaurant where Julian and I were trying to have a quiet dinner. His appearance was shocking, not just for the confrontation it promised, but for the potential scene it could cause. Thomas approached our table, his demeanor erratic, demanding to speak with me. Julian stood up, positioning himself between Thomas and me, a clear sign of his intention to protect. The altercation was brief but intense, with Thomas loudly accusing me of betrayal and Julian demanding he leave. The restaurant staff intervened, and Thomas was eventually escorted out, but the damage was done. The incident left us shaken and more aware of the potential danger Thomas posed. In the days that followed, Julian and I took steps to ensure our family's safety. We informed the school of the situation, cautioning them to be vigilant. We also spoke to a lawyer about a restraining order against Thomas. These actions, necessary as they were, felt like an intrusion into the life we were trying to rebuild, a constant reminder of the affair's far-reaching consequences. The ordeal with Thomas was a harsh wake-up call. It highlighted not just the personal toll of my actions, but also the external threats that could arise from choices made in secrecy. As we dealt with the aftermath of the confrontation at the restaurant, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility for the chaos that had engulfed our lives. The incident with Thomas at the restaurant was a stark reminder of how deeply our family life had been affected by my actions. The tension at home, already high, escalated further as Julian and I grappled with the additional stress caused by Thomas's intrusion. Our children, sensitive to the changing dynamics, exhibited signs of emotional distress. Our daughter's performance at school began to suffer, and our son became increasingly withdrawn. Julian and I were struggling not just with our personal issues but also with the need to provide a stable environment for our children. The counseling sessions continued, focusing not only on the issues between us, but also on how to best support our children through this tumultuous period. We sought guidance on how to communicate with them about what was happening in a way that was age-appropriate and reassuring. Despite the challenges, Julian and I made concerted efforts to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the sake of our children. We kept up with family routines, attended school events together, and tried to ensure that home life remained as stable as possible. However, the strain was evident. Our interactions, though civil, were often forced, and the distance between us was palpable. During this period, I reflected a lot on my choices and their impact. The affair, which had started as a means of seeking something missing in my life, had spiraled into a situation that threatened the very foundation of my family. The guilt I felt was overwhelming, compounded by the sight of my children's confusion and pain. Julian, despite his own hurt, showed a remarkable strength in dealing with the situation. He was actively involved in the children's lives, providing them with the support and stability they needed. His ability to put aside his feelings for the sake of our children was something I admired, even as it served as a painful reminder of the damage I had caused. As we navigated these challenges, the legal situation with Thomas was resolved. The restraining order was granted, providing us with a sense of security, though the fear of what he might do lingered. This resolution, however small, was a step towards regaining control over our lives. The chapter closes with Sophie acknowledging the complex web of consequences resulting from her affair. The realization that her actions have caused deep and possibly irreparable damage to her family weighs heavily on her. even as she and Julian strived to navigate this challenging period together. As autumn gave way to winter, the fragile equilibrium in our household began to shift. The combined weight of the affair, the issues with Thomas, and the ongoing strain on our family took its toll. Julian and I, despite our best efforts, were drifting further apart. The gap that had formed between us seemed insurmountable, and the counseling sessions, once a place for open communication, became a forum for airing grievances and disappointments. The realization that our marriage might not survive became increasingly apparent. Julian, once willing to consider reconciliation, began to speak of separation as a real possibility. The discussions about our future, which had been tinged with hope, now took on a tone of resignation. During this period, our children continued to struggle. Our daughter, caught in the tumult of teenage years and the chaos at home, became more rebellious. Our son, younger and less able to articulate his feelings, showed signs of anxiety. Julian and I were united in our concern for them, but divided in everything else. The turning point came unexpectedly one evening. Julian and I had a particularly tense exchange, which escalated into a heated argument, the first time our emotions had spilled over so visibly. The children overheard, and their reactions, fear, confusion, tears, were a stark reminder of the impact our issues were having on them. That night, after the children were asleep, Julian and I had a long, difficult conversation. It was clear that while we both cared deeply for our children, our marriage was beyond repair. The love and trust that had once bound us together had been eroded by my betrayal and the subsequent events. We discussed the possibility of separation, a topic that was painful but necessary. The idea of dividing our family, of not seeing our children every day, was heart-wrenching, but we had to consider what was best for them in the long term. We agreed to seek legal advice on how to handle the separation in a way that would minimize the impact on the children. As I lay in bed that night, the reality of the situation washed over me. My affair, which had started as a misguided attempt to find validation and excitement, had led to the unraveling of my family. The enormity of my mistake was clear, and the knowledge that I was responsible for the pain and disruption in our lives was a burden I would carry with me. This chapter marks a pivotal moment in the story, where Sophie and Julian come to terms with the fact that their marriage cannot be salvaged, and begin to face the reality of separation, all while trying to protect their children from further harm. The decision to separate, once spoken aloud, set in motion a series of actions that felt both necessary and heartbreakingly final. Julian and I began the process of disentangling our lives, a task that was as much legal and logistical as it was emotional. We met with lawyers to understand the implications of our separation, and to ensure that our children's well-being remained at the forefront of any arrangements. Our home, once filled with the sounds of a bustling family, became a space marked by silence and unspoken sadness. We informed our children of our decision, trying to explain the situation in a way that was honest yet reassuring. Their reactions were a mix of sadness, anger, and confusion. We reassured them of our love and our commitment to remaining active and present in their lives, despite the upcoming changes. The process of separation was methodical and, at times, overwhelmingly bureaucratic. We discussed living arrangements, finances, and co-parenting schedules. Each discussion, while necessary, was a reminder of the finality of our decision. Julian and I tried to keep our interactions civil and focused on practical matters, but the undercurrent of hurt and regret was always present. As we navigated this new reality, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The affair with Thomas, which had once seemed like an exciting escape from the monotony of my life, now appeared as a series of misguided choices that had led to the destruction of my family. The guilt and remorse I felt were profound, and I struggled with the knowledge that my actions had caused so much pain to the people I loved the most. Throughout the separation process, Julian and I maintained our commitment to our children. We attended their school events together, celebrated holidays as a family, and kept up with the routines that provided them with a sense of stability. But the dynamic had changed irrevocably. We were no longer a couple but two individuals coexisting for the sake of our children. As the final paperwork was signed and our marriage officially came to an end, I felt a deep sense of loss. The finality of the divorce was not just the end of our relationship, but the closing of a significant chapter of my life. Julian and I parted ways with a mutual understanding of the irreparable harm that had been done and a shared hope that we could both find a way to move forward, separately but with a continued commitment to our children. The chapter closes with Sophie coming to terms with the end of her marriage and the realization of the long-lasting consequences of her actions. The focus is on the practical and emotional aspects of the separation and the efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy for their children in the midst of this significant life change. The finalization of our divorce marked the beginning of a new uncharted chapter in my life. The aftermath of the affair and the unraveling of my marriage left me in a state of introspection. I spent long hours reflecting on my choices, the hurt I caused, and the lessons I had learned from this painful journey. Life as a single mother was a new terrain filled with challenges and adjustments. I juggled work, parenting, and the responsibilities of running a household on my own. The time I spent with my children became even more precious, and I focused on rebuilding my relationship with them, being there for them in ways I hadn't been before. Julian and I settled into a co-parenting routine, communicating primarily about matters related to the children. Despite the end of our marriage, we shared a common goal of ensuring that our children felt loved and supported. We were no longer partners, but we remained connected through our shared love for our kids. The experience with Thomas, which had once consumed me, now felt like a distant memory, a chapter one wished to leave firmly in the past. I learned that seeking fulfillment outside of my marriage had not only hurt those I loved, but had also led me away from confronting the issues in my own life and relationship. As the seasons changed, so did my perspective on life. I began to find joy in the small, everyday moments, reading a book in silence, watching my children play, and finding satisfaction in my work. I started attending a support group for individuals, which provided a sense of community and understanding. Sharing my story and hearing those of others helped me realize that while my choices were my own, I was not alone in facing the consequences. I also embarked on a journey of self-discovery, exploring my interests and passions, some of which I had neglected over the years. I took up writing, a hobby I had always loved but never pursued seriously. The act of putting pen to paper was therapeutic, a way for me to process my thoughts and emotions. Looking back, I understood that life is a tapestry of choices, each thread intertwined with consequences. My affair was a choice that led to pain and loss, but it also brought hard-earned lessons about love, trust, and forgiveness. I learned the importance of being true to oneself and the value of facing problems head-on, rather than seeking escape in illusions. As I moved forward, I did so with a newfound sense of self-awareness and a hope for the future. I knew the road ahead would have its share of challenges, but I felt better equipped to face them. The scars of the past would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as reminders of my journey and the resilience I had discovered within myself. The chapter, and thereby the book, ends with Sophie embracing her new life, carrying the lessons learned from her past experiences, and looking forward to a future filled with possibilities. My 23 female dad cheated on his wife with my mom, but they stayed together. My mom died when I was a few months old, and my stepmom didn't want me in her house, so I was raised by my grandparents, who passed away 2 years ago. My dad died before them, so everything was willed to me and my half-brother, 28. I inherited their house, almost everything in it, and all of my grandma's jewelry, which is worth about $750,000. I was also the sole beneficiary of their life insurance, $300,000. My brother got a few heirlooms and some money, but it was far less than what I got because he inherited a lot from our dad while I pretty much got nothing. At the time, he didn't have a problem with it. He's getting married soon, and I was talking to his fiancée, who told me my brother told her that our grandma wanted his future wife to get married wearing the jewelry she wore at her wedding. I have no idea why he told her this. He was not close to our grandma at all. She definitely did not promise him her wedding jewelry. I was actually planning on wearing it to my wedding and talked to my grandma about that. I told my sister-in-law that I couldn't give her the jewelry. She can borrow it for her wedding, but she has to return it because I plan to wear it to my wedding too. She told me she didn't want her sister-in-law to wear the same jewelry as her. I told her I couldn't give her the jewelry and that if my grandma wanted my brother's wife to have it, she would have willed it to him. I thought that was the end of it, but it was not. My brother called me that night and told me that his fiancée was crying because of me, and he deserved to have something from our grandma because I inherited a lot more than him. I reminded him that I grew up with my grandparents and had a much closer relationship with them. He cussed me out and said I tricked them into leaving me most of their money. That isn't true. They raised me since I was a few months old. I went to a local university instead of my dream school so I could stay home and care for them in their final years so they had a better relationship with me. I told him that his fiancée could borrow the jewelry if she really wanted to wear it to her wedding, but I couldn't give it to her. His mom called me the next day and called me all sorts of nasty things for depriving my brother of something my grandma promised to give him. If my grandma had promised him that, I would have given him the jewelry, but I know she didn't, so I'm not giving it to him. Edit. All the jewelry's insured. Except a few small pieces I wear regularly are in a safe deposit box at the bank. The jewelry in question is a necklace and earrings. I might give her something else if they don't shut up. Not the idiot, and at this point don't even let your fiancé borrow the jewelry because I highly doubt you'd get it back without getting the police involved. Tell her your grandparents wanted you to have it so you'll use it since she doesn't want you both to wear the same jewelry. Inform her that your brother got a lot inherited to him from your father. He can use some of that money to get her a nice set of jewelry. These people plan to keep the jewelry and probably sell it. That's the only thing explaining their responses. Or buy an expensive-looking but fake jewelry set, saying it's from the collection, and let her borrow it. Pretend to have a great fake reservation. Then cackle as she flaunts it. She'll probably get it appraised within a month, but she's not planning to return them. Can you imagine how embarrassed and angry she'll be? If she plans to return them, she will never know and will feel beautiful. I do see your point. That would be hilarious. I would laugh even more when she decided to keep it, then laugh so much more when they try to sell it and realize it's fake. And please don't give them a smaller item if they don't shut up. All that teaches them is that boundary stomping, whining, and sending their flying monkeys at you will at least give them something. That's a dangerous precedent to set with these two. Your stepbrother's very persistent and entitled. Your grandmother wanted you to have it. My teen female mom got pregnant young, and she has me and my brothers 18 male and nearly adult male. My mom and the person I know as my dad started dating while she was pregnant with me. My whole life I was told he was my father, and his name is on my original birth certificate. My bio mom and dad were unfit parents, and it resulted in us being taken away by CPS. They eventually got their parental rights taken away. We were later adopted by a different family, and they are who we see as our mom and dad. A year ago we discovered that the man we thought was our bio dad is in fact bio dad to middle brother. And our bio dad is a person we had never met. Our bio dad reached out to us, and while we were hesitant at first, our parents suggested we at least just say hi back. We did, and eventually we ended up meeting bio dad and later his family. Through this, we learned that bio dad knew that our mom was pregnant, but chose not to be involved, and wanted nothing to do with us as he wasn't ready to have children. Present day, bio dad is married, and he and his wife are struggling to have kids. So after several months of slowly gaining our family's trust, bio dad suggested to our parents that they have unofficial custody with him, where we'd spend some weekends, holidays, summers, etc., and such with him and his wife. My parents said that they're not willing to give up weekends and holidays, etc., and don't want to have any unofficial agreement either. This annoyed my bio dad, and he started throwing a dad card around saying that he's our father, and therefore he has the right to have us around as much as he wants, and that his suggestion was him trying to be reasonable. He then came to us saying he wanted us to be a family again, and they were keeping us from him, etc., and just trash-talking my parents a lot. I guess he was trying to get us to side with him, but this just made us start to not like him. The next few times we met, he just kept on trash-talking our parents, and I told him that he had multiple chances to be a parent but chose not to. He doesn't get to be a parent when it's now convenient for him, and had he stepped up earlier, he wouldn't be in this situation. I also said that if he kept trash-talking our parents, we'd stop talking to him. Now we've stopped talking. Our bio dad then took to social media, telling any and everybody that my parents are evil, and keeping him from the only kids he might ever have, and calling us kids brainwashed, dumb, and ungrateful. Since then we've had his family and friends contact us, saying we should apologize to bio dad, and rethink our decisions. Others blame our parents, saying that one day we'll snap out of our parents' brainwashing, and regret cutting our bio dad off. Some took it even as far as to say we're ungrateful, petty, and all kinds of mean things. Am I the idiot for telling my dad it's his fault he's in this situation? Not the idiot. This is ridiculous. How can a perfect stranger enter your life as a nearly legal adult and start claiming parental rights? If he cared, he would have been present in your younger years. You and your siblings owe him nothing. As far as you're concerned, he's just a donor. You have actual parents now, even though you're not biologically related. I agree. I'm a parent, and I'm horrified at how bio-dad is acting, especially with these horrible social media posts. I've replied to his friends asking what OP should be grateful for. The fact that our bio-dad knew about his children and abandoned them to CPS for the first 17 years of their lives, only to show up when they're adults and expect someone to love him. You're absolutely correct. He had multiple chances to be a parent and chose not to. He doesn't get to be a parent when it's now convenient for him. If his family and friends keep harassing you, respond with that and block them. You had a great adoptive mom and dad who really care about you and aren't using you to sue the childless wife. I suspect if bio-dad's wife has a kid, you'll get dropped again. Never have contact with him again. His behavior is off the rails, mean and ridiculous. Move on with no regrets. I, 27 female, go out with my sister Lily, 35, once every 2 or 3 months for lunch. That is both because she has 3 kids, female pretween, male kindergartner and female toddler, and barely has time, and because I have very few days to myself thanks to my residency. Throughout this whole lunch, she's complained nonstop about how hard it is to have kids and be a mom for the past few years nonstop. She talks about kids 100% of the time and complains. I was extra tired during our last lunch and I lashed out at her, saying that I don't remember anyone forcing her to have kids, and now that she has them, she should be a big girl and deal with the consequences of her actions and decisions. She got super mad and called me a judgmental idiot who knew nothing about parenthood. I was like, exactly, I'm taking one of the most challenging paths a person can take in my career. And I've never complained, not even a word, because I chose it myself. She told me I was a horrible sister and an even worse aunt, and she said she wanted nothing to do with an idiot like me. Am I the idiot? Edit. She does have a husband. She's a stay-at-home mom. Her husband has some financial struggles. Other kids were planned, informed choices she made. She's naturally a person who finds things to complain about, even when there genuinely isn't anything that bothers her. Not the idiot. You can only take so much from a person. Being so utterly negative like that sucks the life out of folks. The conversation sounds exhausting and one-sided. That being said, she's right about it being hard. I'm not a mom, but from seeing friends and family, it's lonely for them to get screamed at and puked on. It was her choice, as was your choice. Neither should be minimalized or marginalized for their challenges. Yeah, I think it's the sucks the life out of folks part. I had a chronically depressed friend that kept getting worse. I would do anything in my power to uplift her when we were together. A few friends even told me she seemed uplifted around me. I truly loved her as a friend. Years went by and she got increasingly negative and it drained me. I had to give up the relationship. I still miss her, but I just can't do it. Everyone's the idiot here. People complain about the things happening in their lives. You probably complain about things in your life that are stressful. Your sister complains about her kids because they're stressful. It's literally what people do. Telling people they can't complain because they made their choice. So, therefore, they lost the right to complain and it has to be all rainbows and butterflies is absurd. However, you can't ask to change the subject or just sympathize. Also, don't compare your choices with your sister's. You're different people with different goals. Stop competing for whose life is harder. Based on your logic, you chose to have lunch with your sister. So, therefore, you can't complain about that experience. My boyfriend got very skinny in the last few weeks. I feel he lost at least 10 kilograms, 22 pounds. I saw him shirtless yesterday and was kind of shocked at how much weight and muscle he lost. I still think he's beautiful, but I'm worried about his health if it continues like that. Yesterday, I told him that I noticed how much weight he had lost, and that he should start eating more before he gets sick. I said it's not a serious tone at all though, just chill. He got kind of offended and told me to mind my own business. He was very dismissive and kind of rolled his eyes at me, which made me sad. I apologized and I told him I was just worried about him. And then he said, "Do you want me to call you a fatty and eat less?" Yeah, don't be annoying. I was so shocked that he'd say something like that. I wasn't trying to be mean at all. I'm still very sad about this and we haven't talked much since then. And I don't get why he even said this because I'm at a normal weight. I'm 5 feet 5 inches and 150 pounds. But his comment made me very self-conscious. His overall behavior has been very dismissive for some time now and I don't know why. But anyways, was I wrong for saying that? Should I apologize again? If his comment made you self-conscious, how do you think he felt when you told him to eat more? Body shaming isn't just when a skinny person makes fun of a bigger person. It's okay for you to point out his weight, but when he suddenly turns the tables, you're the victim? Nah, you're Delulu and you are the idiot. I'm confused. You said he'd lost 10 kilograms, 22 pounds in a few weeks. So something like 4 to 7 pounds a week and he's now skinnier and you went straight to eat more? If this is correct, this is dramatic, rapid weight loss that indicates a serious medical issue. This is dear, I've noticed that you've lost a lot of weight very quickly. I'm worried something is wrong. Have you checked in with your doctor? Are you feeling okay? Type of weight loss. You are the idiot for how you handled it. His response suggests to me that something is up and he's entirely unaware of it. I hope you guys are able to talk about this productively and that he's okay. When someone loses 10 kilos in weeks, it is a big indicator that something is very wrong in the body. It's not healthy as weight shouldn't just go away like that. It isn't delusional or body shaming to point out a medical emergency to your partner. Screw it if it hurts their little feelings. It's unhealthy and must be pointed out and checked out ASAP. Sudden and unexplained weight loss is a common sign of cancer for a singular example. Would you rather they just ignore that and potentially let it get worse? Absolutely not, the idiot. They should go to a medical professional as soon as possible. Hopefully it's nothing, but something could be very wrong. My ex-husband, Adam, has a brother, Larry. During our marriage, Larry was the nightmare brother-in-law. Constantly boundary stomping, picking at people until they got upset, gaslighting them, etc. He grew to dislike me as I was one of the few to call him on his crap and tell him to stop. I kept telling Adam we should go low or no contact, and he refused. Larry then began crap-talking me to everyone. Adam never stood up for me, despite several conversations. Unfortunately, my daughter, then a young teen now a mid-teen, ended up hearing a lot of it, and it really hurt her as we're close. I did my best to keep my kids from Larry, but Adam continued to bring my kids around them. Due to this and many other factors, we divorced. I tried to fight in court that Adam couldn't bring the kids around Larry and lost. One day Larry went too far, crap-talking me in front of my daughter, and she went off on him, defending me and calling him out for his bullying behavior. She later told her dad it was her or Larry, and if he didn't pick her, she'd never go over to his house again. At the time I had full custody as my kids were old enough to decide who to live with, and they picked me. They eventually compromised that my daughter wouldn't have to be around Larry again, but Adam would continue seeing him on his own. My daughter entered therapy shortly after and didn't see Larry after that. With the help of her therapist, she finally told me that when I wasn't around, Larry would bully her and instigate until she got upset. Then her father would ground her or make her apologize. Adam was then asked to join therapy and apologized. Adam and our daughter have since begun seeing a therapist to work on their relationship. Well, Larry died last week of a heart attack. Adam is naturally devastated. The funeral was yesterday. My daughter refused to go. I told my daughter she didn't have to go. My son, a teen, chose to, and I respected that. I did make sure my daughter was positive she didn't want to go, and she stood firm, taking several days to mull it over. We also discussed sometimes we do things we don't want to for those we care about, which also led to a great conversation on boundaries, and I ultimately respected her choice. If it's relevant, the funeral fell on my custody day. Adam's angry at me that I didn't force my daughter to go. I said that given the circumstances, she shouldn't have to go. Several members of Adam's family have reached out and told me that I had enabled my daughter to alienate Adam and Larry from each other, and have further allowed her to be disrespectful by allowing her to miss the funeral. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your daughter learned how to stand up for herself. There's zero point in making her go to a funeral to pay her respects to someone who never respected her or you. Good job, Mom. And if Adam doesn't knock it off, I can foresee another funeral your daughter may skip. It sounds like your ex-brother-in-law only abused women and girls, and your ex was okay with that. Hasn't Adam learned anything? Despite all that therapy, etc., your daughter will end up going low or no contact with him and his family, and he'll be crying wondering why. Honestly, The fact that they're all trying to attack both you and her for her making a choice based on our own needs just shows the very toxic lack of respect for personal boundaries